The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the all-new X Zone Broadcast Network and the Talkstar Radio Network. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. That's 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone at xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv at hotmail.com. And our websites, www.xzoneradiotv.com and xzonetv.com. My guest this hour is Bruce Campbell Adamson, and he's a genealogist and historian and has traveled throughout the country gathering photos and material for his books. In 1991 to 1992, he began researching the JFK assassination and became certain that Oswald was indeed not a lone assassin. In fact, he believes that Oswald had nothing to do with the actual assassination, since there was no GSR found on Oswald's hands. Joining me now from someplace in the state of Nevada is Bruce Campbell Adamson. And Bruce, welcome to the X Zone.
Well, thank you for having me on, Rob.
It's great.
It was no nitrates on the face.
No nitrates on the face. Now,
yes, if he was looking down the scope trying to kill Kennedy, he would have been looking down the scope, and he had a clear shot before Kennedy made a turn down Dealey Plaza. So he would have hit him from the front when he had a clear shot.
Okay, where did your interest with the Kennedy assassination stem from?
Well, since 1992, I've been working off and on with the West Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. They gave me all of Oswald's best friend's papers when he committed suicide. That's George de Mohrenschildt, who is tied to all these people that are rich and famous. And in there, I got a hold of his personal phone book, and I spent 2 years and $20,000 researching as a genealogist everybody in the phone book. And I found George Bush Sr. in there, Jackie Kennedy's mother in there, and I pinpointed the date of the phone book as 54, 53. And there are a lot of CIA agents in there, and George de Mohrenschildt was a CIA agent. And so, since 1992-93, I've been keeping the West Palm Beach Sheriff's Office informed of all of my discoveries because they had ruled it a suicide when he committed suicide.
So tell me,
they didn't know he was a CIA agent at the time.
So tell me, was Lee Harvey Oswald part of the conspiracy to assassinate President John F. Kennedy?
Well, I would say that he was not because of the nitrates on his face.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that he, as other people have suggested, that he might have been partaking in a plot into scaring the president into using Secret Service. And that would explain why then he realizes he's set up as a patsy, and that's what de Mohrenschildt said for 6 months before he put a shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. This best friend of his, a CIA agent.
But wasn't Kennedy using the Secret Service already? So why would he?
Not on the railing of his limousine. LBJ was, and I have LBJ meeting with George de Mohrenschildt, Oswald's best friend, 7 months before the assassination.
Well, who was protecting the president then, if it wasn't the Secret Service?
Oh, they were protecting, but they weren't doing as good of a job as they should have been doing. Kennedy did not want him on the railings of the limo, whereas LBJ is well protected with him. in the car following.
All right, I'm having a bit of a problem understanding here that there was a plot to, increase the use of the CIA, of the Secret Service?
Yes. Oswald, if he even shot the rifle, he would have not been aiming at Kennedy. Somebody shot the curb 500 feet north of the motorcade, where there was nobody standing, so nobody would have gotten hurt. So that's irrelevant when you look at that's not an important issue when you look at all the other evidence that has been discovered.
All right, let's talk more about the other evidence that's been discovered on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break. Bruce Campbell Adamson is our special guest. His website is www.ciajfk.com. We'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, right here on the all-new X Zone Broadcast Network and Talkstar Radio.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back, everyone. Bruce Campbell Adamson is our special guest. His website is www.ciajfk.com. That's www.ciajfk.com. And Bruce, why was there this need to use a plot in order to get President Kennedy to use more Secret Service instead of just sitting down talking to him and saying, listen, Mr. President, you need more protection?
Well, this is not my theory. That's not something that I specialize in. I specialize in Oswald's best friend. Now, I focus on his best friend and his writing to Lyndon Johnson, his best friend working with Abe Zapruder, who filmed the entire assassination, and they belong to the CIA's Dallas Council on World Affairs.
Well, wasn't the Zapruder film debunked?
The Zapruder film, they paid the Zapruder family $16 million in the 1990s under the Clinton administration for the original film, yet they remain with to keep the copyright. Yet the Zapruders were friends with Oswald's best friends, and they shouldn't have been compensated. I'm a whistleblower for the federal government, and when you know these kind of things and intentionally compensate the person that's working with the CIA, such as Abraham Zapruder, then you're actually breaking the law.
How can we prove that Zapruder was actually working for the CIA, or is this just speculation?
No, he knew Oswald's best friend, George de Mohrenschildt.
But that doesn't...
My 14 books are on George de Mohrenschildt.
All right, but that doesn't mean that Zapruder was actually working for the CIA. Is there any documentation to corroborate that fact?
I ran an ad in the Dallas Morning News for 2 months looking for people who worked Mrs. de Mohrenschildt worked at the company called Nardis of Dallas. And I found 4 people, including a manager, that knew that Zapruder and Mrs. George de Mohrenschildt were friends 10 years before the assassination. So that is evidence. And
that's circumstantial evidence, but do you have anything that is concrete, that is on CIA letterhead, that you've been able to get through the Freedom of Information Act that says that
the Dallas Council on World Affairs is a CIA organization. They both were members of that organization.
But they weren't on the payroll.
Well, we don't know that.
So up until this time, it is still speculation that Zapruder was part of the CIA.
Well, when you're filming and you hear gunshots, isn't it natural to react for your own safety? And if you did know Oswald's best friend, wouldn't you make the disclosure, or would you keep it quiet? If you have nothing to hide, you bring it out in the open.
But
he didn't bring it out in the open.
But you're talking about one of the greatest conspiracy theories of all time. Who killed JFK? You know.
Well, that's why Leon Panetta supported my research in '92, '93, and now he's CIA director. And when he supported the research in '92, '93, I was implicating George Bush Sr., whose mentor, Neil Mallon, founded the Dallas Council on World Affairs for the CIA.
All right, so tell us a little bit more about this best friend of Oswald's who was in the CIA and how you made all these dots come together.
Well, he gave more testimony. He gave 240 pages of testimony to the Warren Commission, and that's part of the 24-volume set. George de Mohrenschildt, for 6 months, said that Oswald was set up before he put a shotgun in his mouth in Palm Beach and blew his brains out. But before that, he was saying Oswald was set up. And the Palm Beach sheriffs did not know in 1977 that he was a CIA agent. Well, as a genealogist, I started digging. I found out his father-in-law from his second marriage was in charge of more than 250 CIA agents 10 years before Kennedy's death in the coup of Guatemala. And that's evidence that proves that he's part of the CIA. If it was known, they should have brought it out in the open. And also, I have a letter from Alan Dulles, who was a Warren commissioner, to de Mohrenschildt's brother, Dmitri von Mohrenschildt, who was a professor at Dartmouth University. And that's 10 years before the assassination. So 10 years before the assassination, Oswald's best friend is in charge of, his father-in-law is in charge of 250 CIA agents in the coup of Guatemala. And also, George Bush Sr. has written me a letter that he was friends with Oswald's best friend since 1942. And that was dated 1993, the letter, and it's posted on my website.
All right, but where's your proof that it was actually a CIA hit?
Well, they should have made disclosure. You don't put the head of the CIA in charge of the Warren Commission. You got to make disclosure. It's like the wolves guarding the hen house.
But so what
And,
you're if
I found this letter, and the CIA destroyed the letter from Alan Dulles to Dmitri von Mohrenschildt. I found it at a library, and I published it back in '96.
All right, so let me see if I understand this correctly. Lee Harvey Oswald is set up by his best friend who's in the CIA to be part of a plot to increase the security of the Secret Service President Kennedy.
No, when you went into the Secret Service, that's somebody else's theory. That has nothing to do with me.
All right, so,
I just mentioned.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So
that's not me.
All right. So, according to your research, then,
yes,
what was Lee Harvey Oswald doing in the book depository in Dallas, Texas, the day that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated?
Well, de Mohrenschildt's friends found him a job there 2 weeks before, and that's Ruth and Michael Payne, Ruth Hyde Payne. Her mother-in-law, Ruth Ford's Payne, was friends with Alan Dulles.
All right, so once again, I'm going to ask the same question.
Ruth Forbes Payne is a cousin to James Forbes Carey.
What did Oswald, at the time the president was assassinated, have in his possession the rifle that the Dallas Police Department found and claimed that was used to assassinate President Kennedy?
Well, he didn't have that in his possession. That was found on the 7th floor.
But that is the rifle that the Dallas police say that was used to assassinate President Kennedy, right?
That's what the FBI said.
So the Dallas police said nothing about it?
The FBI brought the rifle back with his fingerprints after he was dead, shot and killed.
All right, but when the initial arrest was made, We've got photos from the internet as well as our reference library here that show a Dallas police officer holding the weapon that was used to assassinate, or they claim that was used to assassinate President Kennedy at a press conference.
Right.
Okay, so the initial jurisdiction went to Dallas police, and then Dallas handed it over to the FBI, or did the FBI hand it over to the Secret Service? What was the chain of command?
They took control of the investigation. It should have been the state of Texas.
Okay. So what part did the CIA have in this entire affair based on your research?
Well, Oswald's best friend, George de Mohrenschildt, who was friends with George Bush Sr., and the publishers of Harry Potter just released a book on this relationship between George de Mohrenschildt and George Bush Sr. that is really incriminating, and the author used much of my research in 4 chapters. So if the publishers of Harry Potter are publishing it in the book Family Secrets, then it must have a little bit of merit.
Once again, let me ask you the question, because you're not answering my question. What was the role of the CIA, based on your research, in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy?
Well, Kennedy had fired Allen Dulles over the Bay of Pigs invasion.
So that was the reason why they killed the president?
That's one of the motives.
All right, a motive is a theory. Okay. What else would there be? What is there, because according to the history...
Anybody having prior knowledge of an event that's going to happen can make a fortune off the New York stock market. California today is at $21 billion in debt, as you may know. Or maybe you don't know since you're in Canada. But if you were to go back in 1963, the day Kennedy was killed, the stock market dropped $21 billion. That's a motive. Anybody having prior knowledge of the event can make a fortune, and then the following day buy the same company for pennies on the dollar.
But did that happen?
Well, de Mohrenschildt's friend sold the second largest security firm on Wall Street, Kidder and Peabody, in July of '63.
And Kennedy was assassinated in November of '62?
November of '63. November 22 of '63.
Right.
But the man that owned Kidder and Peabody happened to be friends with Oswald's best friend, but he's also the landlord of Jackie and JFK in Palm Beach. And that's C. Michael Paul.
What about the rumors that Lee Harvey Oswald himself was a member of the CIA?
Well, I think other people have really dove into that. I'm not so much of an expert on that, but I recommend gentleman Dr. Philip Millison's book, Spy Saga. That's proves that Oswald was in the CIA. And Oswald said he was just set up as a patsy, and that's what de Mohrenschildt wrote a book called I'm a Patsy, I'm Just a Patsy.
All right, stand by, Bruce. You and I have to take a commercial break with the news. Bruce Campbell Adamson is our special guest. www.ciajfk.com. That's www.ciajfk.com. Exonation, if you can dig into your pocket and help the people of Haiti, give to the Red Cross. The American Red Cross website is www.redcross.org, and the Canadian Red Cross, www.redcross.ca. I'll be back on the other side of the news with Bruce Campbell Adamson as the X-Zone continues, right here from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and the Talk Star Radio Network.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. Bruce Campbell Adamson is our special guest. A very interesting gentleman that we've had the pleasure of talking to in the past half hour. And Bruce and I were talking off air during the news break, and you were saying how frustrating it is for you, Bruce, trying for the past 18 years to educate people. And how do you deal with the frustration?
Well, I've been intimidated quite a bit, several times. And so what I did is I willed all of my research to the public domain if I should die of a heart attack. Mm-hmm. And I just I figured maybe one day down the line somebody will grab the ball and run a lot better and faster than I can. So I have a life estate in the product. I've sold over $100,000 in books since '96.
Wow.
And I've been doing radio shows since '92. And I keep law enforcement agencies informed. Mm-hmm. And I just, when you try to profit off a terrible thing, it's not a pleasant thing. But if you can help correct the past, then history gets corrected. And it's just hard to people that never. It took me 6 months to learn how to pronounce George DeMorchell's name, and people hear that and they don't want to know what this White Russian, who he was, or anything like that, and it's just a hard sell, But Bush Senior wrote me a letter, saying he knew him since '42,
mm-hmm.
and then he's tied to H.L. Hunt. He dated Jackie Kennedy's mother in 1938. Tied to Abe Zapruder, Lyndon Johnson, Brown and Root, George and Herman Brown. He knew everybody. Clint Murchison. And this is Oswald's best friend.
Wow. Tell me something, Bruce.
Yes.
Have you ever received any threats to your life? And can you can you think of who would want to threaten you to hush up?
Yeah, I've had some threats. And 9/11 at 9:30 in the morning, I lived above a Mexican restaurant in Aptos, California, and I had a guy come to my door, banging on the door to let him in to lay carpet. He had a barbed wire tattoo, and I didn't let him in. And the carpet was brand new in the apartment, and it was a storage room apartment. Mm-hmm. It was a bootleg unit. Nobody knew anybody lived there. And he happened to come there at 9:30 in the morning. So if I had turned up missing at that time, what happened in New York at 9/11 at 9:30 in the morning, actually it would have been 12:30 our time, nobody would have missed me because of what happened in New York City, which is okay. I don't think that I'm better. But then a year later, I had a black helicopter flying over my apartment, and I ended up with a 3-inch bump on my head, and I had to go into emergency. And the U.S. Army was doing war games in 2002 on the Aptos Beach, and it was published in the Santa Cruz Sentinel.
How did you get a bump on your head?
I don't know. The military has a lot of weapons that they can use. They can knock crowds down. I don't know if you've seen this, but they've got they can knock crowds down off their feet from a half mile away. And then a few other times, but I won't go into all the details.
Who was Jack Ruby, and what was Jack Ruby's role? Was he a member of the CIA, or was he just a civilian who got caught up into the? Well,
I have a letter on eBay from Jack Ruby that I'm selling, and he was Russian Jewish, as was DeMorchell. DeMorchell was of also German nobility, or Swiss nobility. But Jack Ruby and de Montchel were born the same year, 1911, and they had the same friends. One guy was George Bowie. George Bowie was taking Oswald out for job interviews and lived right across the street from Jack Ruby. And then right after the assassination, George Bowie moved, and he was a White Russian. So there's a lot of associations. Like, who's ever heard of George Bowie? You know, they've heard of Jack Ruby, but that's the frustration, is trying to educate people. You know, it takes time. You know, and it's, you know, I'm only human. I can't put 18 years of my life in an hour at a time. I can just kind of give you the gist of it.
Sure. Tell me, what, in your opinion, based on your research, is the most compelling evidence that you have come across over all the years that you've been doing your research that you believe to be a smoking gun and should be used to reopen the investigation into the assassination of the late president?
Well, that's a good question. There are two pieces of evidence. There's the Allen Dulles letter that was dated 1953 to George de Montchel's brother, 3 days after Allen Dulles took over as CIA director. He was deputy CIA director before. And I sued the CIA to try to get that letter. They don't have it. They destroyed that letter. The next is the two letters between Lyndon Johnson and Oswald's best friend, George de Montchel, in April 17th and 18th of 1963, a week after the Walker shooting. I don't know if you remember that.
No,
Oswald was partially convicted of shooting, of killing Kennedy, because he took a pot shot at Major General Edwin Walker of Dallas. But Lyndon Johnson is writing and meeting Oswald's best friend a week and 2 weeks after the assassination.
What would you like?
The shooting of Wagner. I'm sorry.
What would you like to see happen? Now, with the evidence that you've acquired, you obviously have connected all the dots with the CIA. Is there a connection because of the White Russian connection that the KGB may have been involved in this as well?
Well, I think the White Russians, it's kind of like what's going on today. The White Russians, how do you tell a White Russian from a red one? The red ones were expert at acting as White Russians, and today, how do you tell a terrorist from a non-terrorist? You don't know until after the deed is done. You know, it's a hard thing to do. You can't really prove it. So I just think that people need to be educated, and I'm not suggesting overthrow of any, retaliation of anybody or anything. I'm just trying to get to the truth, and I guess the best thing would be if Oswald was innocent, to clear his name. And if he was a part of it, then fine. I keep an open mind.
But the investigating that you're doing, the research you are doing, is it to clear Oswald's name, or is it for some other purpose?
If he was innocent, it would be to clear his name. And I've already completed my research. I completed it a long time ago. I've been selling my books since '96. But I've been doing it as my own publisher. I'm the historian, the author, publisher, and I produced a video that was shown in Brooklyn 2 weeks ago on public access TV. So I produced a video tying the September 11th, Princess Diana and the JFK thing all together, before Michael Moore ever did his video. But I don't implicate bin Laden.
Who do you think was responsible for the 9/11 attack?
Well, I don't make a judgment on that. I just found something out. I found out that Mohammed al-Fayed, the father of Dodi Fayed, was friends with the father of the lead hijacker, Elamir Atta. And Fayed lost a lawsuit against the Pentagon and the CIA because they had 1,100 pages on Princess Diana that nobody knows what's in those pages today. He lost that lawsuit 2 weeks before September 11th, 2001. And Mohammed al-Fayed has a brother-in-law who is CIA, and that's Anand Khashoggi. Anand Khashoggi was in charge of the Iran-Contra missile deal, and he was also in business with George Bush Sr. But those are just facts. I'm not saying that constitutes a theory or anything.
1-800-610-7035 worldwide, toll free. 1-800-610-7035. Bruce Campbell Adamson's our special guest, X-Zone Nation. www.ciajfk.com. That's www.ciajfk.com. Is there any possibility that the alleged, that the suicide of Lee Harvey Oswald's best friend, who was in the CIA, was actually an orchestrated hit to look like a suicide?
Well, that's a good question. When he received his 9 shock treatments to Mornshield in the same hospital Oswald and JFK died, his friend, he was corresponding with his friend, CIA Director George Herbert Walker Bush. And they were corresponding, and I sued the CIA, and the letters were destroyed, but then they were added to the presidential library. So if somebody was to make somebody to commit suicide by giving him 9 shock treatments, then his suicide isn't really a suicide. It would be a murder if those shock treatments were CIA sponsored, which people have won cases in Canada where they use shock treatments.
They were done at the Allen Memorial Institute under Dr. Ewan Cameron, which was an operation that was paid by the CIA.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, that's the scary part of it. It's a tough sell, and it's a hard thing to prove. Everything is hard to prove, but
Tell me something.
Tell
me something. You're a very dedicated researcher and a genealogist, and my hat goes off to you. But here's a question that maybe you can help me understand. How can the CIA operate within the U.S. when it's supposed to have a mandate to only operate outside of the U.S.? How does it get away with this?
That's a good question too. They used to be only outside the U.S., and now under Bush Jr., they can orchestrate in the U.S., and they control much of the propaganda media, just as they did in World War II under Nelson Rockefeller, who was a friend of de Mohrenschildt's. Nelson Rockefeller used to run a propaganda film organization for the Spanish countries to keep South America and Mexico from going communist, just like they didn't want Castro to go communist. But he did, and they did want President Trujillo, and Papa Doc Duvalier. They built that only airport under the Kennedy administration in Haiti, under President Kennedy's administration, in exchange for Papa Doc collaborating with the U.S. government. And de Mohrenschildt stayed with Papa Doc at the time of the JFK's assassination.
What was accomplished? What was accomplished by the assassination of President Kennedy? I know that Lyndon Baines Johnson got in, and that goes into the war machine in Vietnam because President Kennedy was against the war in Vietnam. So was this all about the great industrialists getting back into power? And was the finger pointed at the mob for the wrong reason? Or was the mob just an scapegoat as Oswald was?
I think the mob was an scapegoat, and I believe that the Texas oilmen did not have their oil depletion allowance removed or reduced. So that was accomplished because Lyndon Johnson, as Bush Sr., were watchdogs for the Texas oilmen. So that's what I believe there. And the CIA and the oilmen walk hand in hand. The CIA they're a very important partner in the oil industry.
What has been, to this point, within your research into the Kennedy assassination, the most startling fact you've come across?
That the dress that Jackie Kennedy was wearing, the pink Chanel suit, was purchased from DeMornshill's Aunt by Marriage clothing store, and that Oleg Cassini, Jackie's dress designer, and his brother Igor were friends with Lee Harvey Oswald's best friend, George DeMornshill, and they were all White Russians.
It seems to be a very small circle.
Yes. And then Oleg's first wife, actress Jean Tierney, introduced George Bush into politics in 1962 in Houston. She remarried Houston oil man Howard Lee.
Bruce, stand by. We've got to take our final break. Bruce Campbell Adamson's our special guest this hour. Very interesting gentleman. Visit his website, www.ciajfk.com. www.ciajfk.com. Bruce and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break in a couple of minutes. And once again, X-Zone Nation, if you can make a donation to Haiti, www.redcross.org, that's in the States, www.redcross.ca here in Canada. And if you can't make a donation, please say a prayer. Prayers are always welcome, no matter where it is on this planet of ours. As long as people need help, they'll always need prayers. I'll be back on the other side as we continue right here in the X-Zone.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Bruce Campbell Adamson is my special guest. www.ciajfk.com. That's www.ciajfk.com. And during the commercial break, you and I were discussing Haiti, and you came up with a wonderful idea. Share it with the listeners, will you, Bruce?
Well, I have 15 items that on the JFK assassination, and what I could do is my eBay user ID is the same as my website, ciajfk.com. I wouldn't bid now, but give me a few hours and I'll put up a whole variety of my products, just a few letters if you're interested, and I'll donate, say, a percentage to the Red Cross or whatever. They use Mission Fish on eBay. They have all these charity organizations, and I will, for each item I post on the JFK assassination, including the Jack Ruby letter, which I have up there.
Wow.
I'll donate, say, 15% of the sale to. That's
fantastic.
To the victims of Haiti. That's the best I could do. I mean, that's.
Hey, you're part of a solution, not part of a problem, and my hat is off to you.
Yeah, I don't want to. I'm not the guy that wants to upset the apple cart. I'm just trying to be a messenger and do it gracefully. And it's a hard thing to digest for me. I've been doing it for so long, but for a lot of people that have so much faith and belief in our system and country, I don't want to upset them.
Quickly, we've got about a minute and a half left, Bruce. First of all, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. I'd love to have you back on again in the future. But once again, off air, you and I were talking about a lady that both you and the governor of California had proposed to.
Yes, I did her family. Her name is Sarah Lee Shippen, and she is related to Mrs. Benedict Arnold, Peggy Shippen of Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. And I proposed to her in the early 80s or late 70s, and before Arnold married Marie Shriver, he also had proposed to her. And I found out this from Sarah's mother in about 2003. So it's a small world. She turned us both down. I wrote books on the JFK assassination. Arnold married Kennedy, and we're both from Santa Monica, California. That was kind of a neat story.
Once again, let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and where they can buy your books.
Okay, they can CIAJFK.com, or if you want me to get the P.O. box,
Sure.
or they could go on eBay, CIAJFK.com, just as the same as the web, or my phone number is 831-465-9272, or people that, I'm a former postal employee, so if you want to send a stamped envelope, I'll send you a couple articles at P.O. Box 1003, and that's Aptos, APTOS, California, 95001.
Bruce Campbell Adamson, it's been a great pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you, Rob, for having me. I sure appreciate it.
It's been a great
And thank
pleasure.
your producer.
I shall. You take care of yourself. And once again, Bruce Campbell Adamson, his website, Exonation, www.ciajfk.com, and he's going to be putting a bunch of stuff on eBay with 15% of the sale of the items going towards Haiti. His eBay address is ciajfk.com. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with Joseph Farrell as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, right here on the all-new X Zone Broadcast Network and Talkstar Radio. Don't go away.